Thanks for inviting me to come today and speak with you. Yes, I'm Ruth Armstrong and I come from the Darling Downs near a small town called Cecil Plains. Not bragging, but just happens to be the best farming country in the state. I'm serious. And it's also special because it's underpinned by a freshwater groundwater resource called the Condamine Alluvium Aquifer. This water is so clean and so pure that I actually pump it straight into my house as my domestic water supply because I can't keep the frogs out of the rainwater tank. So I'm drinking straight out of the ground this Condamine Alluvium groundwater. But I'm here today because unfortunately, at the beginning of last year, my husband and I were approached by a coal seam gas company that wanted to do some invasive exploration on our farm. And my life has changed since then, and as well as being a wife, a mother and a farmer and a small business owner, I'm also now a full-time coal seam gas activist. The problem that I have particularly with the utter breakdown in the legislative process that has allowed this industry to get legs in rural Queensland. Unfortunately, the state government has issued the right for these companies to explore over all of our farming country and probably in your backyards as well, I might add, without first having undertaken the necessary background environmental assessments to determine whether there are some places this industry can go and some places where it ought not to go. They've given them the tenure first and now they're scrambling madly to tell us that it's okay and they can manage the risks. But they can't. The state government has said that the groundwater that I rely on for my drinking water supply, that the groundwater that I rely on to water my crops to grow food, the same groundwater that probably supplies a water supply to half a dozen towns in the region and tens of thousands of people, is at risk of dewatering if there were to be a coal seam gas industry in the area. But this groundwater has already been extracted and over-extracted by us farmers, and we have been working cooperatively with government for a couple of decades now, and we have taken voluntary reductions in our entitlement to that groundwater because we want that water to be preserved for future generations. I've got very young children and they're here today, and my youngest is 4, and my son might want to be a farmer in the future, and I would like for him to be able to use that water just as I've used it. But unfortunately, so the government is saying to the farmers, there's no more water and you've got to actually cut back on the amount of water that you use because we need to protect these aquifers. But at the same time that they're telling farmers that, they have told coal seam gas companies that there is no limit to the amount of groundwater that they can take whilst undertaking their activities. That is word for word what it says in the legislation. There is no limit of water that they can take in the area of tenure. Yeah, shame, all right. It's a hypocrisy is what it is. And it's as bad as this, that I have heard it said from state government bureaucrats that this document that they rely on, that they tell farmers that the Great Artesian Basin is fully extracted, there's very little water left for future use. In the Walloon Aquifer, where they get the gas out, mind you, they are actually discussing, when this document comes up for renewal next year, that they are going to convert that Walloon Aquifer from a water resource to a hydrocarbon resource. An aquifer that farmers have been told has no more water available for any future use. So this is the level of corruption that we find in our state government. I've also read reports recently that say that this government has failed in its duty of care to do the right thing for the public good in issuing these tenures before they've done these background environmental activities and baseline assessments. It's a disgrace, and unfortunately what it means is I'm down in Brisbane. I've driven down to Brisbane today with my family to talk to you instead of doing what I should be doing, and that's farming. The company that we've got is Arrow Energy, and they've told our community that they plan to be out of our community in 2045. In 2045, I hope to be retired, which means that I'm going to be dealing with coal seam gas for the rest of my life. But in 2045, my son won't even be 40 yet, and I shudder to think at the legacy that this state government is going to force me to leave to my son. Farmers and environmentalists have had a checkered past, but let me tell you this, that if you want to be a farmer and you want to survive in farming in Australia, you can't afford to abuse the environment. Australian farmers... I would tell you today that Australian farmers are environmentalists, and it is the hope and desire of every farmer to leave their farm better than it was when they got it, so that their kids can have a good go at farming into the future. But my state government is saying to me that they actually are going to force me. They will force me to leave a negative legacy for my children and for my community. And that's not acceptable. It's not in my interest, it's not in my family's interest, it's not in my community's interest, and it's not in the public interest. This coal seam gas industry should not be allowed to go wherever it wants to go, when it wants to go there. So law-abiding citizens like myself, when they get the knock on the door, and I've had one, but it was outside of the bounds of our conduct and compensation agreement, but when they do come with that agreement, law-abiding citizens will have to choose whether they sign that document and abide by the law, or whether they refuse to sign that document and take the law into their own hands in order to protect those environmental values of our precious farming soils, our groundwater and our rural communities, and say enough is enough. And if the government won't protect those things that they ought to, then we will do it ourselves and we will lock the gate. Thank you.